I'm Randy Bigley. Joining me on the podcast right now from the Crawford Prevention Programs, Christie Eckert. Hello, Christie.
Hello.
Well, I guess it's Crawford Marion. I'm sorry. I left the Marion off. Crawford/Marion Prevention Programs. Wow, yeah, it's great to have you in again. I know we talk about every month, I think, we talk about something.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we try to.
And always something very cool, very interesting. And this time we're going to talk about you're setting that foundation by talking. We always talk about, you want to talk about to your teens about drugs and alcohol and stuff, but you should start a lot earlier than that and just lay that foundation down, right?
Yes, that's true. We know that parents who have conversations with their kids about the harms of drugs and alcohol, and we mean conversations, not a conversation. Right. Their kids are 50% less likely to use even.
That's a big number. Right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And, having those direct conversations about the harms of drugs and alcohol, you're giving your child the information that they need to stay safe and to make smart choices. And I think that's the big thing to understand. Instead of letting them experiment because they've been led by a friend or peer pressure, or they're just curious, or, social media plays a big part. So understanding that having those conversations gives them the choice to make that smart and healthy choice.
Yeah, and just sit down and talk with your kids, right? It doesn't have to be about drugs and alcohol to start off with, right?
No, we're talking, starting young means building conversation or building that relationship, setting boundaries. So even when they're little, hey, these are the rules. If you break the rules, this is the consequence. Whatever that is, maybe it's just they're not allowed outside the yard or whatever. But when you set rules and you follow through with the consequence if they break the rules, that's showing that structure, and that leads over into that teenage or younger, tween teenage years. So they know that if they do something wrong, they're going to pay a consequence for it. I
think the best way is set an example. Set a good example for your kids, right?
Yes, that's another thing, is understanding if you choose to use substances, that your children see it irresponsible. Maybe you have a glass of wine with your dinner, but that's all they see. Setting the example of how you want them to act when they get to that stage where they may choose to use alcohol. Setting example is always a good prevention piece.
Well, back when I was younger, there was a PSA that ran on TV, and it was about a kid, his dad caught him with drugs, and he said, "How'd you learn how to do this?" He said, "I learned it from you."
Yes, that was a very powerful commercial years ago. And that's the thing, understanding that you're setting the example for your children, and they see that. Whether that's something they want to do or not, what they see is often what they copy. So understanding that, setting a good example.
Christy, another thing that is good to have that doesn't happen so much anymore, and it happened when I was younger. Well, we used to sit together for dinner and just talk.
Yes.
And parents say, "Hey, how was school today? What happened today?"
Yes.
Those days those are hard. They don't come very often anymore.
They're really hard to find that little bit of time. So I always encourage parents, if you travel in a car, when your kids aren't old enough to drive, have little conversations, even if they're just little 5-minute, asking them about their day. What was the best part or the worst part? Not, did you have a good day? Yes. No, you're not going to get detail.
Right.
But as they're younger, you learn about their surroundings. You can learn about, things that might stress them out or irritate them or, whatever. And then you can teach them, skills to deal with stress. So if there's a student in the class that stresses your child out or causes anxiety, let's find out why. So, why does this child bother you so much? What happened? And then what can we do to deal with it? Because we're building those little people into adults. And if they don't have good stress relief skills or stress management or communication skills, that can feed into that need or that feel of the need that they need to use substances to fit in or to mask pain or to deal with stress. So, all of those pieces really are part of preventing youth substance use.
If they come from school and something's wrong, ask them. Say, hey, hey, you look like you didn't have a very good day. What happened? Anything happened today?
Right.
Just, be concerned about their feelings, right?
Yes, and I think the other thing, too, to remember as adults sometimes, when we hear stories, I know when they're teenagers or even just young people, it's a big deal to them. And we're going, okay, this is really not a big deal.
Right.
But in their little lives and their little bit of experience, it could mean everything to them. So validating their feelings, letting them know that the way they feel, that's the way they feel and that's okay. But how do we process through it? How do we not feel that way? How do we look at things from a different perspective so we can understand where that other person's coming from?
Now, your kids are going to eventually go to people's houses and stuff. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think it's important to have discussions before your student goes somewhere. Number one, if you don't know the family, call them, find out. You want to make sure that you're putting your child in an environment that's semi-similar to yours, that have beliefs. Some parents don't have as many rules as you or whatever.
Right.
Meet the parents, call the parents. Call ahead if it's a family you already know. Hey, especially when they're getting a little older, I'm just checking to make sure that you're not going to allow alcohol there or, things like that. There's nothing wrong with asking those questions.
Right.
I think it's also important too then to give your kids an out. So maybe they do go somewhere for a sleepover or something and they don't feel comfortable there for whatever reason. You need to come up with a code word, or if they have a phone and they can text, or, a statement, hey, I forgot to feed the dog, and then you can go pick them up or call the family and say, hey, something's happened. I need to come get my child. Because you want your child to always feel safe and you want your child to feel like they have you to turn to when they don't feel safe.
Yeah. I always taught my kids, if you're at, somewhere, somebody's house, you don't feel safe, call us. Say, hey, can you come get us? Can you come get me? You could just make up any excuse.
Right. Yes.
And it did happen a couple times.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And understanding that, safety is important, or maybe it's just an uncomfortable feeling. Maybe other kids are using and that's not their choice.
Right.
You don't want them to be there. And I mean, if they were caught there, they could get in trouble, even though they weren't using. With a lot of school policies and stuff, they still could be in trouble. So, being open and showing them that you are going to come get them, that safety, you're there for them, whatever it is, a code word, whatever you need to do. Because it is hard as a peer to say, oh, I don't want to be here with my friends. But if mom or dad or a guardian makes that decision, sometimes that's a little easier to get out of there.
And don't be afraid to be be the bad guys, right?
Yeah, so many times we as parents say, we want to have a relationship with our kids, but really kids do want structure and guidance from us. And even though sometimes their attitudes don't, really emulate that or really show that, we have to remember they do need structure, they do need guidance, they don't know how to navigate this stuff. And sometimes you're going to be the bad guy.
Right.
Your job is to protect and keep them safe.
You don't have to be that cool parent, right?
No, and I mean, as much as that is hard to do, it's not really going to produce the outcome that we want. So.
Exactly. Now, on the other end of it, what if they do get in trouble? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that if you've set those standards and those expectations, and a consequence has to be done. Yeah. Again, that's not always easy because they can make your life awful while they're, doing that, you're living that punishment. But I think it's really important to follow through in that structure. If you do find out that they're using even after you've had, these conversations, I think it's important to revisit and say, why? Why did you choose to do this? Sometimes it is just peer pressure and they didn't know how to get out of it. Okay, but we've gone through these, reiterating these outs and these ways to get out of it. And then again, reminding them from the health standpoint. Kids don't want to be unhealthy and they're athletes. They don't want, that's important to them. So, reiterating these are the health risks. And if you have a family history of abuse or something, that's important for kids to know at a certain point as well. Maybe not when they're little, but as they get older and in that middle school, high school age, it's important to understand that because when there's a family history, we're at a much higher risk for addiction and problems. So. Yeah,
it runs on both sides of my family.
Yeah,
so it's rough.
And that's pretty common.
It's why I don't drink. That's why I just don't do it because it's not that I don't. I just don't because I don't want to take that risk.
Right, and that's the thing. We're seeing a real big push too right now. Like even famous actors and artists and all of that are really pushing for no use because they just feel better. It's health reasons and lots of young actors are talking about that now, and I
That's
think
good.
that's important, and I love that they're sharing that. Whether they had an addiction or a struggle, or they just didn't really care for the way everything made them feel.
You know, I don't like the way it makes me feel. I don't like, I'm not a fan.
Yeah, yeah,
I'd rather
that's
be in
fair.
control of myself.
Exactly.
Some people don't mind that. I don't like that. I don't like being out of control of
Yep,
myself.
I agree. So.
Now, and there should be consequences if they do get in trouble. I mean, there's got to be a consequence. I think it happens a lot of times. The kids, there's no consequences. They don't care.
Right.
But you need to set some kind of rules, right?
Right. You have to have those rules, and you have to tell them ahead of time. Look, this is what I'm expecting from you. These are the rules in our home, and when you're somewhere else, and if you choose to break them, these are the consequences. And you've shared that up front, so if they make the choice to break the rules, then they know what the consequence is. So
Just make a rule in your house. We're not using here.
Yeah.
You're not. It's not happening.
Nope, exactly. It won't. Your friends, that's the safe way, because we do know that the use at a young age really does affect the brain.
Yeah.
It's amazing if you see brain scans of an adult brain and a youth brain. The developed brain, the alcohol doesn't affect them, but that developing brain, it really, alcohol and drugs do affect their development and actually change the makeup. So it's important to think about that.
Sure is, Christie. How can people get more information about the Marion Crawford Prevention Program?
Sure. You can go to either our Drug-Free Marion Facebook page or our Crawford County Prevention Coalition Facebook page. We post almost daily or every few days with just tips for parents, everything from how to talk, links to other ideas on how to talk, also talking about drug disposal, medication disposal, everything like that, harm reduction things. We always have something on there that's of value.
And if you do, if you're having issues and thoughts in your head and maybe harming yourself, whatever, go get help. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed of it.
No, 988 is a great resource for mental health struggles. If somebody's struggling and feeling like hurting themselves or just low, feeling low, call 988. It'll connect you right away with someone and get you help. And there's nothing wrong with asking.
There's not, and I wish more people would do that and realize they're not going to think you're crazy or anything.
Everybody struggles.
Everybody does. Trust me, everybody does. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Christie, thank you so much for coming in today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.